Hot Tank program. We are very fortunate to have Mr. Eric Prosser here to facilitate our discussion. We're going to start out just, I guess, with some general information, and then really the core of this is going to be a Q&A session. Any questions you have, please feel free to address them to Mr. Prosser. We also, once again, would like to thank Red Bull for their sponsorship and their generosity in providing tonight's beverages to keep us up and alert, to give us wings, as they say. So, without further ado, sponsor.
All right. Rule number one, never sign a release. No, I'm kidding. All right, thanks. If you don't know me, I'm actually the campus copyright librarian here, and you're probably going, why the hell is a librarian talking about legal issues? Because I was an attorney. I practiced for 12 or 13 years before I saw the light. I decided that was not the best thing for me to be doing. And I have been teaching until this semester a business law course on campus. So, and what I did when I was an attorney, I did help small businesses form. So I just want to talk a little bit tonight about some of the traps and things that we don't often think about when we're creating a business. Because usually we create a business, right? We start with an idea, we're all excited about it. But there are, all right, why is this not? There we go. All right, so three main things I'm going to talk about tonight are the form of your business structure. How you're going to set it up, what's it going to look like. We're going to talk a lot, well not a lot, but hit intellectual property pretty hard. We're all usually good about managing our tangible property. We don't often lose things we own. We know where our car is, we know where our wallet is, we know where our money is. A lot of times we don't think about the intellectual property that we own. And I'm going to talk about managing risk, because when I taught my class, risk was a big theme in it, and how we manage it, because that's where the law and business really have this interplay, is taking care of the risk that has a business. And let me just start by asking, is anyone in here doing a solo project? Okay. All right. I didn't throw it up here on the slide. I actually didn't expect that many solo projects. But one option that you're going to get as an individual if you're starting your own business is a form of business called sole proprietorship. And that is literally the easiest form of business ever. Yeah.
You can also do that LLC as an individual.
Oh yeah, no, we'll be talking about all that. Yeah, a lot of time at the end for questions. But yeah, if you're an individual and you don't do anything but just start doing your own business, you are literally what the law calls a sole proprietorship. Okay? What's the nice thing about being a sole proprietorship? It's you, right? You have to convince anyone else to go along with your business decisions. No, you get to have complete control over the company. Yes, okay? Your taxes, because that's always going to be a big thing when we're talking about formation of companies. Your taxes pass straight through to your 1040, right? It's going to be individual income. One thing that you do always have to think about with taxes when you're doing your business is something we often don't think about, and that is the employment tax, okay? That plus that is you're going to be taxed on that amount. Your employer's paying your share of what you're getting through them, but you're going to be liable for your share as the individual.
So I guess my question is that, like, at the end of the year, there's I get an amount of my taxes back that the government didn't use.
Yeah.
So that amount, if we were to justify it as a quantity, if I was to have to owe taxes from my sole proprietorship, from whatever business I did, would the amount refunded to me that I received go towards that, or would I have to pay it separately? Would I still have
I see what you're saying. It's all the same thing, because when you're a sole proprietorship, you don't have a separate tax return for that business.
Okay.
Okay, it is done through your 1040. Business deductions you'll get to use those as deductions, but you're not going to have two separate tax forms. Because legally, as far as the law is concerned, it's just money going directly to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but what you got to think about, what I was talking about with the employment taxes, when you're a sole proprietorship and you're paying yourself your salary, simply talking about this from an academic sense, with a large dose of practicality involved, okay? And then the second thing is, when we're talking about taxes or talking about the law, I will encourage you always, in your specific situation, you will need to consult a professional. Okay? If you're not an accountant, get one. If you're not a lawyer, get one. If you are a lawyer, get a lawyer. You don't want to be representing yourself. That's just silly. Yeah. So sole proprietorships are easy. You don't even normally have to do anything. Okay? Partnerships. All right? There's two kinds of partnerships I'm going to talk about. General and limited. A general partnership is when you and at least one other person are in business together. All right? It's almost the same as a sole proprietorship. All your taxes pass through. Okay? They come out on your 1040. They come out on your income. The downside of a general partnership is if your partner goes out and incurs business debts, they are now your business debts, whether you knew they were going to do it or not. Okay? You are not required to have a partnership agreement if you're a general partnership. You should always have a partnership agreement. Okay? That's one way you can limit risk, is by determining responsibilities and liabilities up front. A limited partnership is a little bit different. We start to get some protections in a limited partnership. Okay? Trade-off on that is a limited partner cannot have any management role. They don't get to make strategic decisions of this limited liability. Okay? A corporation is a separate legal entity. It's like you're creating another person under the law. So when we're talking about taxes with a corporation, now you're going to have two tax forms. Okay? You've got your own individual tax form for the things you're making, and the business itself is going to have its own taxes. Okay? Corporations, because they are what we call a legal fiction, they're not really a person, they're highly formal. Okay? You have to have formation documents. You have to establish a board of directors. You have to establish officers. Okay? Now it's interesting, go back to yours, you can have a one-person corporation. You can have that single person, you, be the board of... The corporation makes the money, it gets taxed on that income, and then when you pay yourself out of that income, you're going to get individually taxed as personal income. So that money gets hit with taxes twice, but sometimes that's the trade-off for, the protection you get from being a corporation. Yeah?
So as a one-person C Corp, the Secretary of State of Colorado requires me to have, I think it's quarterly or biannual or something meetings, and I have to keep minutes.
Yep.
Even as an individual,
Even as an individual, yeah. And this sounds kind of funny because if you're a one-person board of directors, right, you've got to make your own minutes. And you're like, wait, I got to sit there and talk to myself and write down what I'm talking. That's what crazy people do, right? But the idea is because a corporation is this artificial construct, there's this high degree of formality involved with it. And usually what happens is if you form a corporation, you get an attorney, and literally what they'll do is they'll prepare those minutes, they'll prepare those agenda, and all you got to do is go down to the attorney's office and sign it quarterly, semi-annually, annually, depending on what the state's reporting requirements are. Or you can do it yourself. But you have to keep this formality. If you break down the formality of a corporation, you can lose that limited liability protection. Tell a little story here about when I was an attorney. I represented a company that made pipes, huge pipes. And there was a company in California, and they hadn't paid their bills in probably 8 months. It was a 6-figure debt. And we actually ended up going to trial on it because even though the company we were suing was a corporation, they had done a horrible job of keeping minutes. They'd done a horrible job of keeping records. They were taking money from the corporation and commingling it with their personal bank accounts, which is a big no-no. Yeah. And we ended up winning. And we ended up getting personal liability, even though they had the shell of a corporation they thought was protecting them, because they didn't simply do the things that a corporation is required to do. They didn't keep records. I mean, if you're going to make a contract with yourself as a corporation, you make a contract and it has 2 lines, and you may sign it as president of the corporation and then sign it as an individual. Okay? But it requires a high degree of formality. Limited liability companies are kind of a happy medium. They afford the same limited liability protections that corporations do, with probably 25% of the paperwork. You can be a one-person LLC. The big disadvantage between an LLC and a corporation is that you can't transfer ownership easily in an LLC. An LLC, you have to have an operating agreement. Everybody who's involved in it has to sign it. And it's not like a corporation where there's shares that can be sold. Now, it's easy, relatively easy, I should say, to convert an LLC into a corporation if you ever do want to sell it. And the rules right now allow for that to be a tax-free conversion. It's kind of nice. That could change. I don't think it's going to change with our current administration. They seem to be pretty business-friendly. Yeah. But you never know. Tax laws in the future are always very uncertain. They can always change. But if I were going to just kind of summarize what I've got up there, if you're looking at liability protection, you're going to want the LLC or the corporation. If you don't necessarily need that liability protection, sole proprietorship, general partnerships are fairly easy ways to do things. Okay? Regardless of whether you're a partnership, a sole proprietorship, LLC, or corporation, there are some things you got to have to get. You're going to have to get a business license if you're going to be doing business. All right? That is going to be determined on wherever you got your office at. So if you're in the city limits of Durango, get a business license from the city of Durango. Okay? If you're outside the city limits or in a different city, look at the local ordinances and laws and rules to figure out who you need a business license from. Okay? One other thing you may want to think about is getting a fictitious business name license, because you may not be doing business under your own name. You may have a corporation that does not do business under its own name. Okay? For example, Subway. You guys heard of Subway? You know what the corporate name of Subway is? It's Doctors Associates. Yeah. Having trade names affords you some advantages, right? You don't have to put your personal name out there. It gives you a little bit of anonymity if you want it. If you're a corporation, it allows you to get into a lot of different businesses. You can have a number of different things operating. Okay? In the state of Colorado, to get a fictitious business name license, you just go onto the Secretary of State's website, search to see if that name is taken, and if it's not, it can be yours for a small price. Yeah.
So is that getting into like a holding company?
Well, holding company is typically a corporation that owns other corporations, right? It's kind of like a huge umbrella. Yeah. And the thing is, with corporations and limited liability companies, you can nest them and have them owned by different entities and have them stacked and stacked and stacked, so that if there is any problem with corporate formalities, you have this layer of protection for your assets. And a lot of times it's done for layer of protection for identity. You don't know who's paying whom what, right? Yeah.
How about intellectual property? Like if I own a patent,
Yeah.
I want to form another corporation to license it exclusively.
Exactly.
To use it.
It's like you knew what the next slide was. Yeah. Let's talk about intellectual property. So intellectual property, right? It's intangible things. It's not something that we can hold or, transport. It's not a physical thing. But a lot of the value in corporations these days is their intellectual property. Okay? I have them up here in a particular order just because it's easy to discuss in this order, but this is not the order of value. How many of you right now actually own intellectual property? How many of you ever written anything in your life?
What do you mean by that?
Have you written anything down? A course paper, a letter, who's taken a photograph, taken a selfie? You all have copyrights. Yeah. A copyright is the easiest piece of intellectual property to own because it is automatically created. It does not require registration with anybody. We do have a copyright office, and if you do happen to register your copyright in something, then you suddenly get the advantage of massive federal penalties if somebody breaches your copyright. Okay? But a copyright covers any expression of an idea. Okay? Whether that be in words, whether it be in a photograph, in a picture, architecture, choreography. Yeah, question?
So, if you have an idea,
Yeah.
like an idea and you copyright it, but somebody else has already been using it without copyrighting it, at the moment that you create it, even though it was used by somebody in the past, and then you like secure that intellectual property as your own asset, could you go back and sue them for it?
Yeah, and you did say about copyrighting an idea. You cannot copyright an idea. You can only copyright the expression of the idea, okay? It's a subtle difference, but if we look at, say, poetry, there's a lot of poetry about love. Nobody can copyright the concept of love. But a poet can certainly copyright the words that they use to express love, right? Now, if somebody has already used that or created that expression of it, they've already got a copyright on it. And if you went out there and did the exact same thing and then registered it, you would still have an inferior right to them because they would have done it first. Yeah, but there's other ways to protect things too. They copyright the artistic expression, but really what a trademark for is fundamentally is for consumer protection. Okay? It protects the company because no one else is going to confuse some other brand with your brand. Okay? You guys know we've got Snowdown going on right now, right? Do you guys know what next year's Snowdown theme is?
Comic-Con.
Comic-Con Snowdown. I am waiting for the cease and desist letter from the people who own the Comic-Con trademark. Okay? The thing about intellectual property is, in many cases, if you don't protect your intellectual property, you lose your intellectual property. Okay? It's important to know that distinction. If Comic-Con finds out that we're using that as a theme, and they just go, it's just a little town in southwest Colorado, that doesn't hurt us. Yes, it does. Okay? They have to send that cease and desist letter if they're going to be a responsible trademark owner. Because it's very easy for trademarks to go into the common language. Yeah. For instance, what do you do when you copy a piece of paper in a machine? What's that called? Xeroxing, right? You know how much Xerox wants to remind us it's not called Xeroxing, it's called photocopying? Because they don't want to lose the trademark to Xerox. Kleenex, same thing. It is not Kleenex, it is Kleenex brand tissue. And they will remind you of that. Hey, what's that moving staircase thing? Escalator, that used to be a trademark of the Otis Elevator Company. They lost it. It came into common parlance. So you guys can probably think of some trademarks right now that people, I don't know, use as verbs. What's a big one? Google, right? Yeah. Google could lose their trademark if they don't aggressively say, look, you're not Googling something, you're using the Google branded search engine, right? And trademarks, you can federally register these, and it gives you a right throughout the nation to protect that trademark against anyone else who wasn't using it before you. Okay? There's lots of instances where somebody's gone to trademark something, and then it turns out someone else was using that trade name in a locale. Who's heard of Breyer's ice cream? What's it called east of the Mississippi? Anybody know? What is it, Dr. Valdez?
Breyer's is, what's it?
Breyer's is Edie's, right?
Edie's, and then what is Dreyer's?
Yeah.
So Dreyer's is Edie's on the East Coast, but on the West Coast it's Dreyer's, and the reason why is because of Breyer's on the East Coast. There
Exactly. That's it. I had it backwards.
Yeah,
Breyer's, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's easy to search on trademarks. You can just go to the Patent and Trademark Office website, search on a name, search on a logo. They actually have classified logos. They didn't have the Google image search, but they basically classified all marks. Because you can have a visual mark, you can have a word mark. Right? There are a number of things I could draw if I had a pen, but I don't. Right? You guys know what the most recognizable symbol in the world is if you drew it? The number one. Comes out of a chicken. An egg. If you drew an egg, just about every culture worldwide recognizes what it is. You know what the second most recognizable image in the world is? It's the Coca-Cola bottle. That little shape of it. And they've got a trademark on the shape of that bottle. Okay? You can trademark your packaging. You can trademark logos. You can trademark words. right? And it allows you to distinguish your product from others and allows you to prevent other people from using that. And there are levels of protection, okay? For instance, let's go to the realm of Mexican food, all right? I come from Southern California, where every taco shop's got a name that ends in TOS, all right? So if it's Alberto's Taco Shop, and they trademark that, it's not going to get a lot of protection, because it's simply describing what's there. It's Alberto's place, and he makes tacos. Not very creative, okay? Step above that, Taco Bell. Still a Mexican food, fast food place, but it incorporates taco, which is a food. And you guys know what the bell is? It's not the bell. It was actually the guy's name who founded Taco Bell. Yeah, it was just like, it doesn't necessarily tell you what they're selling, but there's a relationship between Chipotle and Mexican food, right? It's a pepper. We use it in there. And if we really wanted to go crazy in terms of what we want in strongest protection of a trademark for Mexican food, Qdoba. Right? That has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Mexican food. It's a made-up word. But when you make up words that have nothing to do with your product, you get very strong trademark protection. Okay? So when you're developing your brand, developing your product, think a lot about what you want to. They can be identical. Okay? You guys heard of Apple? What's Apple? What's a fruit? Yeah, record company and a computer, right? Technology. You guys know, but what I'm talking about is Apple Records. You guys ever heard of Apple Records? You ever heard of a band called the Beatles? Apple Records was the company that did the publishing and producing for the Beatles. And there was a big brouhaha between Apple Records and Apple Computer because they use the same name. And back in the 80s, they came to an agreement. And the agreement was, all right, we're going to stay Apple Records, and you guys can stay Apple Computers, and the deal is, you'll never get into the music industry. What did Apple end up doing to the music industry? Right? iTunes, right? The iPod. Apple Records got a little upset about this. And I've heard this secondhand from someone I trust who was a corporate attorney for Apple. And Apple ended up settling the case with Apple Records, Apple Computer did. And as this was told to me, she said this was the largest number that she had ever seen on a check in her life. And she works for Apple Computer. We have no idea, I have no idea what that exact amount of it is, but if you trust, reports that were in the news, it was an 8 to 9 figure number that Apple Computer paid to Apple Records. And that's why we have iTunes now. All because of a trademark on the name Apple. Yeah. So they can be identical. You can be identical if you're in different industries, but if you ever want to get into that same industry,
So,
yeah.
so I have an example. And to not reveal what your ideal is to others. I thought the best part was keeping it a secret.
Yeah.
But I own a repair business called Technical, and it's not spelled like technical is spelled. It's spelled TECH-NICHOL because my last name is Nick NICHOL. So
Yeah.
I took that off, and before I actually did the website, did the trademark and stuff like that, there was already a Technical spelled exactly the same way, and it forced me to put a dash in between the tech and nickel, which...
Oh, this is on you were on the website getting the name.
Exactly.
Yes.
The domain was already taken, Technical just the whole word together. So I had to put the dash in. So my question is, with that dash, am I still crossing the line on the previous person's intellectual property? Or?
Potentially.
Okay.
Because the idea of a trademark is it's there to prevent consumer confusion. So if you even have a similar name and you're in the same industry or business, that's going to be a stronger argument for consumer confusion. Okay? And what you'll find, the reason I said where you're on the website is because if you're getting a domain name, right? It's going to be very specific and it's going to involve characters, and it's the same sort of thing if you're getting a business name in a state. A business name, if you have something with a dash in it, is going to be treated different than something with a plus in it, even though they may be the same letters. Okay, it can be that subtle of a difference. We don't care as much on corporate names if there's a little bit of crossover, because when we get to trade, it's going to be the name they're doing business under. So you can have two identically named or similarly named corporations, but if they're doing business under completely different trademarks and trade dress, they're going to be fine. And then finally, let's get down to patents now, because you had a question about patents. Patents are inventions, right? You have to think of something new. You have to think of something novel. And it has to be more than just a simple improvement over something that existed in the past. It has to have kind of the spark of innovation to it. And I'll tell you right now, there's no hard and fast rule on what that spark of innovation is, what the amount of creativity is necessary to get above that hump to get a patent. But the thing about patents is, if you invent something and you get a patent, you have to disclose it. You have to file an application with the U.S. Patent Office, and you have to tell everyone what your invention is. Okay? And the fact that you get issued a patent by the Patent Office is not a guarantee that that patent is going to survive a court challenge. Because not everything the Patent Office issues should probably be patented. Okay? You have an invention. You may not have the capability or the resources to monetize it yourself, to create it, to manufacture it. But you may have the ability to license it to a company that can exploit it. Okay, so you have that ability, and you can create corporations and license your patent to your own corporation, and then protect yourself liability-wise. Okay? Yeah.
So if we have, a team and they think they have something new.
Yep.
Now, I mean, obviously, if they were going to sort of make, obviously a huge investment, they had a lot of capital, you go out and get a patent attorney, and the patent attorney is going to go do all the due diligence and see what's available, what's not available, look for potential overlap. But is there a sort of a low-cost solution where sort of for their, where they can spend maybe just a couple hours, do a really high-level overview, to give a little bit more confidence before they move forward with, sort of, let's say, with Octane? And then obviously, if they get capital or they're moving forward, then they can go get a patent attorney. Is there any recommendations you might have?
You can do a search on your own. Google, you guys heard of Google Scholar?
Yes.
Yeah. So Google Scholar also, in addition to doing searches on academic articles, it has a patent search feature now. So you can literally search on patents through Google Scholar. Durango Public Library, here in the next, I don't think it's open yet, but they've got an agreement with the Patent and Trademark Office, and they're going to have what's called a Patent and Trademark Resource Center at Durango Public Library. So they're going to be set up, and you can search what's the West and East Coast databases for patents. They will have information on how to do that search. They're going to be trained in it. If you have any questions about how to do it, you can also come see me in the library. I know how to do patent searches. But we're going to have basically a regional patent research office in town that you'll be able to use. I don't think it's going to be able to help you this semester with your competition. I can help you this semester with your competition if you want to come find me in the library. But yeah, it's easy to do a simple, bare bones, quick, cheap patent search. Okay? It will not by any means be what I would consider an exhaustive patent search, and it would not be by any means a patent search that a patent attorney would consider something that they would rely on. But for an initial idea, if you have an idea and you do a search and you find it's already out there, well, you know it can't be patented. But the fact that you don't find it doesn't mean it can't be. Okay? But one way to protect things that are secrets that can't necessarily be patented or you don't want to expose to everybody is a trade secret. Okay? And a trade secret is exactly what it sounds like. It derives its value from not being known. And you have to protect it. How do you protect trade secrets and potential patents? Non-disclosure agreements. All right? If you are going to be soliciting entrepreneurs and capital and they want to know what your idea is, and you think your idea is patentable or no one else is doing it, you want to keep it a trade secret, you will need to get a non-disclosure agreement and you will need to make every potential investor sign it. Yeah.
What about professors here?
Hell yeah.
The intellectual property policy here says something about being updated, and it basically it's covered. Talk to them, it's okay. And I've talked to a couple of them, and they said, yeah, it's okay.
No.
And what about
Well, it depends on what they're saying it's okay about. Because typically what happens at a college or a university is universities and colleges have kind of a traditional arrangement that they have with the researchers and professors there. Arguably, professors, since they're employees of the college, could be considered to, all their work could be work for the college, and they wouldn't necessarily own copyrights in the journal articles they write. But traditionally, higher education, the professors own the authorship, for instance, of their articles. When we get to inventions and research, it gets a little different. Traditionally, what's happened is, in universities, they basically let the researchers do what they did originally, and they let them kind of get their own patents. The big thing that changed that was probably the precursor to Red Bull, still around, not an energy drink, Gatorade. You know why it's called Gatorade? Florida. It was developed at the University of Florida. Okay? And the guys who developed it got a patent on it, started making lots of money on it. And then the University of Florida said, you could have developed that with our resources and our funding, we should have a share of that patent. And there was basically a big agreement, and now the royalties off of Gatorade fund a lot of University of Florida athletics and facilities. And the guys who invented it still get a big chunk of that. But nowadays what's going on with like intellectual property policies at universities is that the rule is if you're getting a substantial amount of assistance from the university or the college, they're going to own the patent. So they can get some royalties off the patent as an income stream. Now, as a student, if you're sitting there going, talking to your professors about, patents and things like that, you're not necessarily covered by that intellectual property policy. You're not an employee of the college. But if you're out there exposing it without an NDA agreement, right, they don't necessarily, I don't think any professors you talk to would probably stab you in the back. But the idea is, if we're going to be responsible, we're going to protect our intellectual property, we may want to have a non-disclosure agreement. And just go, hey, I've got this idea for a business, but I really don't want anybody else to know about it or use it, carry around your clipboard. You all signed a release, you didn't even think about it. It works. People sign things, sure, I'd like to hear your idea. But yeah, you need to protect these. All right, what's the biggest, most monetized trade secret right now?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, right? Nobody knows what it is. And Coca-Cola goes to very long, and they go to a lot to protect it. I don't know if you've ever looked on a Coke bottle, especially around Passover. It's got the little K with a circle, which means it's kosher. And in order for food to be certified as kosher, a rabbi has to examine the whole process of the food being made. And Coca-Cola literally brought in a rabbi, had him sign a non-disclosure agreement about what he was seeing, but allowed him to certify it as kosher if it was made in a kosher way. The rabbi came in, he knows exactly how Coke's made, he says, yes, it's kosher, and he hasn't said a word since then about what's in it. And that's what Coke did to protect it, okay? So you can share it, but you got to take the steps to protect it. Yeah.
So then I guess too bad so sad, just don't tell them.
No, or you make the decision, right? If they're not going to sign it, there's nothing that's going to limit their ability necessarily to not take that out and do something with it. But maybe it's somebody that you trust, and you've got to make that call on your own. But yeah, if they don't sign it, there's nothing there that's going to allow you to prevent them from doing anything with
You
it.
would process the one step, maybe,
Just disclose to who your investors.
or to the government or anybody.
Well, you got to disclose it to the government if you want a patent for it.
I mean,
And if you're using other patented technology in it, there's a potential that those patent holders still have licenses, and that you might potentially be infringing on it. Not always. That's literally such a fact-specific scenario where I can't give you a yes or no answer. And I can only say maybe. And it's all going to depend on how you're using that other license, that other patented technology, what your innovation is, and yeah, there's just a lot of variables in there.
So if I have this new desalination process, but I'm going to call it a trade secret, but it might involve other technologies that are currently commonly being used. Who's going to know what my secret? Who's going to come looking at it to know if I'm using somebody else's technology that I have to pay them?
Usually those patent owners. Yeah, because what will happen is if you're using patented technology, and even if you're keeping it as a trade secret, you're not letting anybody know. I mean, if you're in that industry and they own that patent and it's something that they think they can monetize or have been monetizing, they'll go in and reverse engineer what you did.
So what if I'm on a oil drilling platform out in the ocean and I'm desalinating ocean water? Who or how could anybody come and find out? I would say it's secret. You're not going to come on my platform without permission. I mean, who's going to know? Even though they're like, hey, he's doing something, maybe it's involving something that's related to ours. Is the government going to have some sort of purview over that because I'm selling it to municipal entities, or I mean?
Well, the government isn't going to enforce a patent for a patent holder unless they are the patent holder, but they shouldn't be. But I'll say this, and I told students in my class that, you know, all it takes to file a lawsuit is $300 and a typewriter, and both of those are optional. Okay? Because what could happen is if they even suspect that you're violating, you know, that you're infringing on one of their patents, if they file a lawsuit, as soon as they get it into court, they can use discovery methods to do an examination of whatever the technology is. And at that point, if they find out, oh, it's not our technology, it's not our patent, they can just dismiss the lawsuit. Or if they happen to find out, oh, it is, then, you know, you're not only on the hook necessarily for, you know, infringing their patent, but if you're actively concealing it as well, that could add some extra money to whatever they get out of it. So you're right, from a risk standpoint, maybe nobody will find out. From a legal risk standpoint, that's up to you as the business owner as to whether you want to roll those dice or not. Yeah. Yeah.
Before we leave intellectual property,
Oh, we can come back to that. Yeah.
Software.
Yeah.
Where does that fall in there, like app development or something like that? How do you protect yourself against
Copyright. I mean, copyright is usually the strongest way to protect app development. There's the potential to get a patent for code, but typically what you have to do to get patent on code is that the code has to produce something tangible. Okay. So, for instance, code in a 3D printer, if it's novel enough, could potentially be patentable because it's unique. Code on an app, if it's simply just making something that's an app output, it's more likely you're going to be using copyright and then licensing agreements, right? And we'll talk about, we're going to get to agreements right now and contracts. So we're going to talk about managing risk, okay? And this is kind of what we were talking about too with, are they going to find out? Business is about uncertainty, right? Sometimes businesses fail not because of anything internal, but an external event happens that they weren't planning for. We've got to find ways to manage risk. One of the big ways we can manage risk is insurance, okay? We all have insurance, right? If we've got a car, we should have auto insurance. If we're renting or owning, we should have homeowners or rental insurance. But what tends to be like the big cost if there's a legal issue? Where does most of your money go to? Huh? Attorney fees. Yeah. How many of you guys have protection right now that would pay for an attorney for you? Oh, one. With what? Do you know?
You have parents' insurance?
Huh?
Our parents' insurance?
Oh, your parents' insurance has it, okay. How many of you have auto insurance though? Do you know if you get into an auto wreck, if you look at your auto insurance policy and you're sued, the auto insurance company will provide an attorney for you. They will pay for it. Okay? If you have homeowners or rental insurance, that usually includes a little bit of litigation protection where they'll pay for an attorney for you. Okay? But that's just, you know, property related. You can get liability insurance, and I will say you should get liability insurance if you're a business. All right, that protects against things that you may not even be able to protect against. The customer who comes in and slips and falls on your store, on your floor. Was it a clean floor? It doesn't matter. If they got $300 in a typewriter, they can sue you. Right? And regardless of how much money might eventually get paid out in settlement, or even if you win a trial, do you really want to incur $100,000 in attorney's fees just to be morally right? No. Okay? So seriously, see an insurance broker if you are going to have a business that is going to involve the potential for liability. You want to get liability insurance. And there are a number of different types of liability policies out there. They cover almost all kinds of risks. You have to have a specific attorney's fees provision in there if you want to have your legal costs paid in a contract dispute. It's one of those things we often forget to include if we're new business people, but then when things go south, you might have to sue. And I'm not talking about just contracts with other people. I'm talking about in the partnership agreement. I'm talking about in a limited liability agreement. I'm talking about in corporate formation documents. Okay? Because what happens is when we're going into a business with our partners or our friends, or heck, even our family members, everybody's optimistic at the start of a business, right? But we never think anything's going to go wrong. But things do go wrong. Okay? We hope they don't. But when the good times are going, that's when we got to plan for the bad times. And that's when you want to start spelling out immediately, all right, if this corporation breaks apart, how are we going to divide the shares? How are we going to dissolve the corporation? What are we going to do if somebody dies? Right? What are we going to do if one of our partners who's married gets divorced and the spouse wants 50% of their ownership in the company? Do we suddenly want to have, a disgruntled spouse making ownership decisions? Not necessarily. There are ways to protect against all of those things. So that if there is a divorce, anything that's transferred through a marital settlement agreement is immediately bought back by the corporation or bought back by the company. Okay? That you have the right to do that. You have to plan for these horrible events when things are going well. And then the other thing that you always need to do is plan on how you're going to do your accounting before you start making the money that you need to account for. Okay? Know what your tax liabilities are. And if there's one big thing I'm going to tell you right now, do not screw with the IRS. Okay? Don't try to get fancy with your taxes. Don't try to get fancy with your employment taxes. Because the two easiest ways to get in trouble are being a little sloppy with your employees or trying to mess with the IRS. Because that's one government agency that isn't going to let you go. Yeah?
So how do you feel about asset protection layered, like offshore corporation?
If it's legal, you can do it, right? There are a lot of, the way the laws are, the way the loopholes are, there are backdoors, there are ways to structure your companies and your corporations that you can minimize the amount of tax you pay. There's a reason that Apple has billions of dollars stashed overseas. And what they're doing is not illegal, all right? We might call into question their, corporate citizenship, right? But they're there to make money, and that's what they do. But what I'm talking about with taxes and accounting, especially in a small business situation, it's the sort of thing where, I got a little bit of a cash flow problem, I'm going to need to pay you under the table for a little bit. Yeah, things like that, which, are between friends or seem like an accommodation, can very quickly snowball into interest and penalties that will break your company. Okay? Cash flow is a tough thing. It can happen, but don't mess with the tax man. Okay? How did Al Capone get nailed? He didn't get nailed for being the mafia. He got nailed for not reporting income tax. Okay? Don't mess with him. So if there's some takeaways I have, and then we're going to open it up to a bunch of questions here. Number one, seriously, consult with professionals. All right? If you're really starting a business, if you're really serious about it, talk to financial professionals. Talk to legal professionals. Talk to an insurance professional. All right? Every dollar you spend in avoiding risk and consulting with a professional will probably save you 10 times that amount in the future. Yeah.
And just so you know, there are resources out there for you. Now, maybe for Hawk Tank, it's not going to be imperative that you have a legal team. But let's say you finish Hawk Tank and you're saying, we're going to do it. We're going all in. Then there are resources in the community to help you. For example, Small Business Development Center, which is located in EBH. They would be a great place for you to go, talk to Mary, who's I believe is the director, and say, hey Mary, I need some help, some legal advice. The Small Business Development Center receives money from the Department of Commerce, as well as from other grants, and they have resources there for you. Okay, and that's a great place where they will put you in touch with a lawyer, and some of those grants will actually pay their initial fees, so there'll be zero out-of-pocket expenses for you, just so you know.
How do you feel about like websites like LegalZoom or kind of stuff like that for small business?
I like them. If you asked an actual attorney, they'd be, oh my God, they're horrible, right? But it's just like any other kind of information out there. I mean, don't take something off of LegalZoom and just go print and use it, right? Use your brain power, because not everything in LegalZoom is going to apply in all 50 states. But it's a good base, right? It's a good starting point. And there are a lot of forms in the law that really are just that. They're just forms. The language is the same everywhere. But really what you got to do, the big concern using those is consider what you're using in respect to your individual business. Because every business has unique risks. Even two identical businesses in the same industry, if they're in different locations, they've got unique risks that may be climate-based or weather-based. So you have to do that. But yeah, I don't have a problem with LegalZoom. I mean, a lot of those are good, strong, well-used forms, and heck, lawyers steal all the time. There are no citations in contracts, all right? We just grab what we need. But yeah, don't be afraid to use those, but don't just use them blindly, is what I'd say. Yeah. Again, like I said, protect that intellectual property. It's easy to lose intellectual property if you're not diligent about it, okay? If you've got a trademark and somebody's using something similar, don't be afraid to look like the jerk and send a cease and desist letter, okay? It's really hard for people to do that because, you know, fundamentally, most of us like to be liked if we're not psychopaths, right? But the thing is, you have to protect that asset. And if you're not protecting it, if you're not stringent about NDAs with trade secrets and potential patents, you could lose it. And if you lose your intellectual property, it is gone, okay? The cops cannot be called to repossess your intellectual properties. It doesn't happen. It's out there. And then again, really, anticipate problems. Think of everything that could possibly go wrong. Even if you don't think there's more than a 1% chance of it, it could happen. Insure against it. Find ways to limit your liability through contractual arrangements. There are ways to do it. But that's kind of all I've got for you tonight. I mean, it's really difficult in 1 to 2 hours to basically give you a summary of a 1-semester course that's really a summary of 3 years in law school. We're really kind of distilling everything down. But the idea is just know that these things are out there, that these are issues that you have to think about and have to consider that you may not have been aware of. Because think about it, how many of you knew that you actually had coverage tonight that paid for an attorney? Yeah, not a lot of you, but now you know, you've learned something. But I'm going to open it up now to questions just in general. But thanks a lot for coming out tonight. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So let's say I go through Hawk Tank and I complete business plan and go forward, whether I win or not. But then I'm going to go forward with it. And then I'm going to go to a lawyer, I'm going to go to a tax person and these other professionals, I'm going to be paying them.
Yes.
And now that's a business expense that I can expense under that corporation or whatever my form is. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all deductible expenses.
So as a deductible, well, even though I don't have any customers or income yet, I still am going to fill out taxes to show I spent a bunch of money, but I didn't make any money.
Right. And potentially, some of those business expenses can be carried forward to future years to offset future income. There is that flexibility in business expenses that that initial outlay, even though you may not have any profit to offset it against immediately, can be carried forward.
So how about in relation to my investment in the company? Is that,
So here's where we're getting into kind of the formalities I was talking about. So let's say you form a corporation, and then you as the individual are going to loan money to that corporation, right? Put the seed money in. You would want to have literally a signed agreement between yourself and yourself as the corporation saying, I am loaning the corporation, let's say $75,000 for startup costs, here's the repayment schedule, and now that becomes a corporate obligation. And you are now a creditor of your own corporation. You still have the ability to always renegotiate that. I mean, it's not set in stone. You're the person making the decision. But having that, if you didn't make that formal document, that's when you start commingling personal and corporate assets and could lose that corporate protection.
so would I want to then also establish with my, I guess my EIN or my business, my employer ID, use that to establish a business bank account?
Yes.
And then put money in that account with that signed agreement?
Exactly. And he said, I don't know if you guys, just to use some lingo there, EIN is an employer identification number. So you all have your tax numbers, right? It's your social security numbers. When you form a separate business, when you form a corporation, something that's considered to be a separate entity, you apply to the IRS and you get an EIN, which is basically the social security number for the corporation. It's a 9-digit number. They're all unique. And what you do is you form separate bank accounts. You don't want to have your personal money in the same account as corporate money. Ever, 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 ever. Write checks to each other. Document it. Always make sure those transfers are documented. And honestly, it's a good idea, even if you're a partnership or a sole proprietorship, to establish a business account anyway. Because it makes it a lot easier then to track business expenses versus personal expenses when it comes time to your taxes at the end of the year. Yeah.
So if I put $1,000 into my business bank account, and I can use that $1,000 to pay for professionals, and I can pay the expense, like business expense, my gas, my per diem for food,
Yeah.
or if I go stay overnight at a hotel somewhere to meet someone, all those expenses out of that $1,000 with that, from that account.
Yeah. If it's a corporate expense, pay it out of that corporate account. And if you have to loan the corporation more money, make that agreement between yourself as to what you're putting into the corporate account so that it is documented as a transaction between the corporation and you.
Each time I transfer money from personal to business.
Absolutely. Or backwards, right? If it comes out of the corporation into the personal account, there'd be to be a reason why it's doing that. It could be a repayment of that debt, right, which you want to acknowledge. But yeah, you want to make sure that those formalities, that there is a strict line between your personal expenses and those corporate expenses. And it's easy to blur. It's really easy to blur. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say we're pursuing a patent, and we're trying to kind of figure out the steps that we need to have in place before we go to like a patent lawyer to present it to them. How important are things like the prototype? Like, let's say we need to put a lot more engineering into it before it's like perfected, but we still want to go through the steps of doing the patent before it's perfect. Is it super important to have like this polished prototype laying out?
You don't need a prototype for a patent. A lot of patents have been issued, many are issued without a prototype. It's the idea, it's the concept, it's the drawings, right? It has to be described how the invention is going to work, what is novel about it. You literally don't need the prototype.
Okay.
Yeah. And one thing about a patent too is if you start monetizing, if you start getting out there in the market, the clock starts running on when you need to get that patent application in.
Okay. How long does it generally take, roughly? Like,
to get a patent, I'd say 2 to 3 years is about the time.
about 10 grand is kind of what I understood is like a low ball.
That number is going to depend on your patent attorney and what type of patent it is and how much back and forth there is between the attorney and you and the patent office.
Okay.
But it is expensive. Yeah. But so Sometimes, is it monetarily worth to get the patent? You don't know if you can monetize it. Maybe, maybe not. But you do get that 17 years protection. But the thing what I was going to emphasize is, if you do start selling it, if you start showing the prototype, if you start demonstrating the prototype, and it's out there kind of being aware of and in commerce, get that patent application in within a year.
Okay.
Because if you wait more than a year, you may not be able to get it patented anymore because it's been out there too long.
Okay.
Yeah.
The patent is effective the day you turn it in, not when it's
Yeah.
accepted.
And the thing is, unlike most of Europe, Europe has this basic standard where it's first to invent. So if you can prove that you were the first one to think of the concept and invent it first, you have rights. United States, it's still first to the post office. First application in, even if you weren't the one to first think of the idea, if it's still patentable at that point, you have priority on the patent.
Do you know if that's like all of North America?
I don't know if it's all
specific?
North America, but I know it's us. Yeah, there's a question here, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm hearing about here is kind of geared towards people who have ideas, things that are not yet created, or businesses that rely on the production of said idea. What if you're in a service type of business where, for example, your services is the installment of technology, whatever that may be? What is some best practices that you can take away from here that you would say, here's what you should capitalize on as a service provider?
Yeah.
You know, not really much of like creating something new, but kind of like the service of installation, what have you.
Yeah, when you really get into kind of the service industry, you're not looking at it in terms of intellectual property, patents, and trade secrets, unless you got a special way of doing something service-wise that you might want to, not let anybody know what your secret is. But really, it's trademark for you. It's trademark. It's really establishing that brand. It's establishing that service, right? You want to get a good brand. You want to get a good mark, so that as you grow and expand, people associate your service with your company.
Right. Like Subway can't sue another sandwich shop just because of the formality they have or the procedures that they do to prepare a sandwich. It's just
Right, that's not high tech there. There's nothing secret about a Subway sandwich other than possibly what's actually in their meat, right? But yeah, Subway can't sue somebody for making a Subway. Subway can sue somebody for making a Subway under a sign that said Subway or something close, right? Yeah,
I do.
yeah, yeah.
For a lot of the things you've been discussing, are there any significant differences like between for-profit and non-profit business?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I didn't really talk about 501c3s, which are kind of your not-for-profit. I say not-for-profit because we used to always say non-profit, but you're allowed to make a profit. You actually are. You just have to do it accidentally. Okay. Oops, I made a profit this year. But some of the things are like when you have a corporation that's for-profit, that money has to either be reinvested in the corporation or distributed to shareholders, right, as dividends. Somebody's going to be making money off it. You've got that not-for-profit corporation, you're not distributing that money to shareholders. You're not paying bonuses to people, right? You're putting it right back into whatever as I think the IRS language is, the charitable aim of the organization is, okay? So, yeah, what you want to do is you want to form your organization, and then you just get certified by the IRS as a 501c3 organization, which allows you to then basically be tax exempt as long as what you're doing is under one of the categories that they allow them to exist. And they're very broad categories, okay? It's fairly, I'm going to say it's fairly easy, but there's a very wide umbrella that a 501c3 corporation can be under. Yeah. It's just, you're not there for profit, but you still want to have the same formalities, particularly with if you're giving money to it and taking money out of it for whatever reason. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
So sort of maybe stretching it a little bit when we talked about what you talked about. So what I was asking earlier about, I have intellectual property and I have an LLC or a corporation or some form that owns it. And then I'm thinking about liability layering. So I have a subsidiary, then I form another company, and then I'm going to license it exclusively to that company, and then use that company with that exclusive license to get investors. We're going to own part of that company, but I still own 100% of the intellectual property.
Yep.
Are there advantages there? Am I kind of just creating more paperwork for myself? It's just
I think yes to both. I mean, there could be advantages there, but again, there's just not enough detail there for me to say yes or no, right? But when you start creating other corporations and nesting and using LLCs, there can be advantages, or it could just be an exercise in paperwork. I mean, obviously it's done, and it's done with some frequency, and it's done with some advantage, okay? But it doesn't necessarily work for everybody, and it might be, I mean, Michael does international business, and he might have a nice little perspective on,
I think it's my immediate reaction to that.
Yeah.
Would be to talk to a tax professional.
yep,
And then starting a holding company, that would be a later thing. If I start several different companies with several different inventions, and then I want to then put them all under an umbrella, I would form another one. And
you can do that. That's one way to go. Yep. Yeah.
So if we're creating a product that would have to be registered with the FDA,
Yeah.
would you say it would be important to get a legal professional to help throughout that situation? Or
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always say yes. I mean, if you think you've got an understanding of it, go for it. But, you know, anytime you're dealing with government approval and government licensing, if you can get someone who does that for a living, even if you're paying them, think about what your time's worth, how you can spend that time better developing your business. I mean, the returns you get from a competent legal professional pay for themselves easily. Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah.
so if I'm starting my corporation and I'm put 1,000 or whatever, 10,000, and business expenses, but I'm not an income, or I don't have no one to charge my time to, as far as taxes, and can I keep track of that, and that's worth something that I've invested in it, or it's just my time that I've spent, like for potential future equity discussions and tax liability.
If you're putting the own effort into your incorporation, but you're not getting paid for it, that's not necessarily something that you can use as a write-off, right? I mean, we often call that sweat equity, but that's the sort of thing where if you get, you know, and that happens a lot with businesses, is that you may get two partners and one has the money and one's going to do all the work. And then they agreed, okay, we're going to split the profits 50-50. I'm going to get paid back my investment, and the way that you're going to earn that is you're the one that's going to be doing the work. But typically, you're not able to write off time as a loss that isn't being charged to anybody. Now, if you charge it to somebody and they don't pay you, now you can write that off as a loss, right? Because that's an account receivable that was never collected. But just your own effort for your own business, yeah.
That's not a form of investment.
It's a form of investment, but not one that's probably going to get you any monetary advantage with the IRS. Let's put it that way. Because it's time investment.
Or as an accounting for it, like when I get the investor to say, hey, look, I've spent $10,000 on this.
You can do that. I mean, it's an argument, right? That's negotiation is what we're in there, right? Yeah.
Anything else? Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, remember, Mr. Prosser is available in the library. You can also email him any questions that you may have. And
Not legal advice I can't give you.
That's
Remember?
right. That's right.
Just academic opinion.
But
Without reviewing any of our articles of formation or anything like that.
We'll take a look at it, but it's not legal advice. Nothing is legal advice.
and then also we have Professor Michael Scott in the back, and go knock on his door, just play me. But he's another
That was
great,
that bullet about anticipate problems.
great
Yeah.
resource. And he's also located in EDH. And once again, we're all here to serve y'all. We're all here to sort of help you sort of take your idea to that next step. So, once again, thank you so much, y'all. I will send you the link for the video. I will ask Mr. Prosser if we can give you the slides too. I can
Yeah,
send you-
I'll ship them to
I
you.
can send you those also. And then I'll also give you a heads up on our next workshop that's coming up. And then signing in for tonight, if you just sign this release, this is just that we're filming, and that's all you need. If for some reason you haven't been receiving any emails from me, come to me and tell me, hey, Dr. Valdez, I haven't received any emails in terms of information, and I'll make sure you're on the list. That's all we have. Awesome, thank you all.
Speed dating gonna be?
Speed dating is, Megan?
Tuesday, February 6th from 5 to 7 in EBH 107.
Okay, what we're doing is some of you have asked, like, hey, I have this need need for a capability that we don't have on our team. That's what this is for, okay? Or, hey, I have this capability, maybe your friend has a capability, doesn't really have an idea, and then we're going to bring them. So what we're going to do is, we have a small team putting this together. There'll be food, there'll be drinks, and we're just going to kind of follow the Go Code Colorado. We'll go, people will sort of talk about sort of what their business ideas. You'll have other people sort of talk about what their skill sets are. We'll do a little speed dating and see if we can make any matches. Really informal, super fun sort of event, and that's when that'll be. Thank you, Megan, because Megan's sort of leading that one up.
Next Tuesday?
What was it again? Next?
It's this coming Tuesday, it's February 6th from 5 to 7, and it's going to be in EBH 107. So on the second level.
We're going to have to update that because it's a new thing we just started putting together. And the team's going to be sort of putting out informational blasts. They'll be putting up a desk, and so they're going to really start marketing that pretty heavily. And we will add that to the schedule. That's a great suggestion, Nash. I'll make sure that Mr. Flores does that.
Yep. We're going to be following up with it. We only just got the confirmation today.
Yeah, they're working hard. We've been going back and forth with that.
We should see an email about it.
Yeah, you totally will. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Thank you, Mr. Prosser.